You're very welcome to the Firm and Fast Golf Podcast. I'm your host, Shane Derby. In this episode, I'm pleased to once again welcome Mr Goggin to the show. It's been 3 years since his last appearance, and his 7 Mile Beach golf course in Hobart, Tasmania is now approaching the final few months of growing. We get a sneak peek as the final flourishes are curated by both the construction, agronomy and operations team. Matt introduces us to some of the holes which have recently been featured on socials, and we hear more about progress and planning for 7 Mile Beach's little brother, the artist formerly known as 5 Mile Beach, now rechristened the North Course at 7 Mile Beach, for which the design firm King Collins Dormer have been entrusted to design and construct. It was great to catch up with Matt about developments in Hobart, and indeed his recent elevation into the senior golf echelons. Thanks for tuning in. We really do hope you enjoy our chat. And away we go. Mr Goggin, you're very welcome once again to the Firm and Fast Golf Podcast.
Thanks for having me back. It's been a while.
Well, it's been 3 years, would you believe? Crazy, eh?
Yeah, time flies, right, when you're having fun, apparently.
Absolutely. So listen, many thanks for joining me again. How are you?
Yeah, good. Just sort of was back home for Christmas in summer, which is always nice. It's been pretty chilly over here in North Carolina. Had Christmas at home, so it's always awesome. Hobart in December it's a happening place, so we had a great time.
So there has been some water under the bridge since 2022. I can attest to the fact that my podcast recording skills have improved substantially, and that I won't be recording my audio for today on my bog standard Dell laptop mic like I did the last time.
Brilliant.
Yeah, having re-listened to it again over the weekend, your recording was perfect because you did it yourself. Mine, not so much. Must do better was the note to self.
Yeah. The recording on your side is, and on both sides, kind of nice little safety measure just in case.
Absolutely. Anyway, 3 years on, and you've now got a completed golf course that's in the final months of growing, another one in the works, and I believe you've also recently got married. Sounds like it's been pretty busy in the Goggin sphere, as it were.
Nothing happening at all. Just a usual sort of 3-4 month period. No, it's been exciting for sure. Yeah, wedding was awesome. It was we actually had a booze cruise out on a boat on the Derwent, which is like, you know, if you've ever been to Hobart, like the river's sort of the main attraction. So to be able to go out there and spend a few hours with some friends and family and have an awesome day, that was great. And then the next day we officially put some flags in at 7 Mile Beach and played the sort of 11, 12 hole loop that we're going to be opening up in April. And it might actually be 14 holes by then. So that was awesome to see the flags in the ground. And we sort of had a family grudge match, if you like, which my team took out the grand prize. So we were able to hold our head high and have bragging rights for another 12 months. But it was a great time.
You engineered that well, so.
I did. Yeah, I did. I stacked the teams. I made sure Mum didn't have a good team, so just in case.
What a wonderful son you were.
I got sick of it. She used to beat up on me when I was little, so come on, I need to get it back now.
Well, if I'm remembering it properly, she was the one that used to watch you on the range, and when you said, "Mum, why am I hooking it?" she just hit a fade.
Yeah, no. I said, "How do you stop hooking it?"
Yeah.
She said, "Well, just stop hooking it. Why am I hooking it?"
Stop
doing it.
Yeah.
Stop doing it. I just hit it straight when I need to hit it straight.
Yeah,
thanks, Mum.
It's easy. It's easy. Natural golfers be damned. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Listen, before we get on to the main event, I'd like to extend some birthday wishes to you. You celebrated a significant birthday in 2024, which has opened up some additional competitive golf and playing opportunities as a result.
Yeah, I must admit, I wasn't really as excited. Like everyone's like, I can't wait to turn 50. I'm like, I don't know. I've kind of liked my 40s. I didn't 50 sort of, but 50 is the new 40, right? Or the new 30. It's been fun to play a little bit. I was sort of ramping up last year, playing a little bit more tournaments in Australia and just trying to get back into the groove, because it doesn't matter how much you play in your home course, or if you're not actually playing real tournaments, until the gun goes off, you really have no idea really how you're playing. Like, you might be able to kill it around your home course and practice well, but it's a big difference when you're playing in big tournaments. I was actually shocked. I mean, the first one I think I played in was the Senior US Open, and it's a big event. Like, I was actually shocked. I don't know what I was thinking. I thought they'd all be sort of low key, but the US Open was like a legitimate big tournament, awesome venue, and it was great to get back into it. And it got me back into that sort of competitive flow and remembering how much I missed competitive golf. Like, I mean, I like golf. You know what I mean? I don't obsessively play every day. If it's a great golf course, you'll get me out there, but I'm just not. I don't have to play every day. But man, I miss competing. That's for sure.
And you had to pre-qualify for that, yeah?
Yeah. There was it was actually funny. The week before was my daughter had beach week, which is where the whole senior class goes down and they all rent big houses in on the beaches in North Carolina. So there's about 100 of them down there. So my prep was to chaperone 10, 18-year-old, 17-year-old girls while they were going a little bit too crazy. And that was my practice. 3 days. So I left that with hardly any sleep and just drove up there and had a good day. And then, it was quite funny. Posted it in the chat and they're all very excited.
So how has it been back competing against many of the guys you would have played with over your time in Europe and indeed on the PGA Tour in the States?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny because there's so many people who you're probably acquaintances with but not really friendly with. They get back, they're like, "Oh, it's so good to see you. What have you been up to?" I'm like, "Dude, well, I played out there for 15 years or something." He never said 2 words to me. Now we're like buddies. But that just sort of speaks to the atmosphere out there. It's a lot more congenial, and everyone's sort of excited to be out there playing again. And I mean, the pointy end is still the pointy end, right? There's some really good players, and if you're going to win a tournament, it's not like you can just sort of play average and think you're going to have a good week. But it's an interest. It's just bizarre. It is just bizarre because even the caddies are the same. So you think these guys would have moved on to some younger players, but they're still out there with the same guy they were caddying for 20 years ago. So it's very Twilight Zone-y.
I saw quite a few of your fellow Australians were in the field at Newport Country Club. Richard Green, Cam Percy, Stuart Appleby, Greg Chalmers, who I was a good mate of yours, and Rob Pampling, to name a few. I assume there were a few dinners had over the course of tournament week?
Yeah. Well, I caught up with a few guys. I mean, we sort of all kind of keep in touch anyway. Actually, just sort of kind of my Bucks party type thing. Not really. We all went and played some courses up on sort of Fry's Head in the Hamptons there, and which was a bit of fun. So we always sort of keep in touch a little bit. So, but yeah, like it was great to see everyone. Played lots of practice rounds, and sort of getting back into it. It's enjoyable actually. I can see why guys love it. Like if you get out there and you do well, it's just it's pretty awesome.
So you actually opened with a nice 66th, I believe, to immediately get into the mix. You did end up finishing 4 over for the tournament, which Richard Bland won.
Yeah, he won in the playoff,
and your 4 over at the tournament equated to a tie for 51st in your inaugural USGA Seniors event.
Yeah, I played well for about 15 holes, I think, and that was it. And after that, it was all downhill.
And how did you find the Newport Country Club? I believe it has design influences from both Donald Ross and A.W. Tillinghast.
Yeah, well, I think now how did we play it? Our front nine, which is normally sorry, no, that's not right. It was reversed. I don't know whether it's reversed from how they normally play it. It was reversed from when I played the US Amateur there.
Okay.
So the first was the 10th, the 10th was the first, and so I don't even know which way it goes. But the new 9, which I think was the Tillinghast 9, right, is a really good 9 holes of golf. The back 9, which we played, which is normally the front 9, I think, we played as that sort of loses its way, gets down on the marsh a little bit. I mean, it's a really good golf course. I mean, it's spectacular, but I really enjoy the holes on the top side, I think.
Yeah, you apparently likened it to it being not too dissimilar to the land available on the Mornington Peninsula.
It's not really. I mean, it is and it isn't. Like it's not really true links land or anything like that. It doesn't have sort of big, wavy, rolly hills. It sort of just isn't. It sort of has the top side and the bottom side. The bottom side is like very close, is like on a marsh, so the land's quite flat. So they actually have a couple of really interesting holes down there, but it just feels a little bit different to the rest of the golf course. And then the holes that sort of play along, and get down there are not great. But it's, I mean, you're picking you're picking nits, really. Like, it's a really, really good golf course.
I believe historically the course has never had a water system, which takes firm and fast to a
Yeah.
whole new level. As
Yeah,
obviously
yeah.
somebody that spent significant amount of time knocking around the sandbelt, how firm and fast did you actually find Newport compared to Royal Melbourne or Kingston Heath?
Well, it was soft, and they'd had a ton of rain,
Mhm.
so it was soft. I played there when Tiger won the US Amateur, and it was burnt out, and there was almost cracks in the fairway. It was crazy how firm and fast that was. I mean, I remember back then, I mean, obviously they've lengthened a few holes, but I remember hitting, you recall tee shots and like, well, I hit an iron here. And like, I'm hitting driver now because there's no way I can get to that bunker with an iron. While in 95 or 96, 95 it would have been, the ball was just running forever and ever and ever. So, yeah, it is amazing really how old school that setup is. But when we played it, it was, had a ton of rain and was wet.
Oh, well, next time, maybe.
Yeah.
Listen, we might take a look at your appearance at the 2024 New South Wales Senior Open at Thurgoona Country Club. Yes.
Yep. On the Murray there.
Country New South Wales on the Murray. It seems it was to your liking.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like at sort of senior, like my game's still good enough to where if I play halfway decent, I feel like I can sort of get around the mix. So it was nice to sort of put yourself in position to win a tournament. I probably should have won it, but I let Macca squeeze, get one through on me there. So maybe next time. But yeah, it was more to get ready for Q School. I needed to play some events. That same thing where you just can't just practice around in Charlotte and not have any. When you're only playing 3 or 4 tournaments a year compared to when you're used to playing 30 tournaments a year, you just sort of can't roll out there and be super sharp and competitive. So I was trying to play in a few events to get going. I know a few other Aussies had done that and had pretty good success at Q School. Unfortunately, that didn't work out, but I played well in those couple of tournaments, and it was nice to see the guys again. There was a lot of guys that I'd probably played a lot more golf with and was a lot more friendly with than the guys on the US tour through coming back to Australia all the time. So it was nice to see a bunch of those guys and catch up again.
So as you mentioned there, next up was first stage qualifying for the Champions Tour, which I believe you won the first stage, which is a 72-hole qualifying event at Saboba Springs in California by a shot from Stevie Gallagher.
Yeah, I played with Stevie the last day. Q schools are a bizarre thing because you just had to finish top 20, to move on, and we're all sort of first, second, and third, the last group off, and everyone's just sort of hanging on, like trying not to do anything crazy. But we had a good day, and it was good to catch up with Stevie again because he's a good player and still gives it a smash. So I imagine he'll do quite well in his senior career as well because he's kept his game pretty sharp.
So you progressed on to the final stage, which I believe was held at TPC Scottsdale. As a former Scottsdale resident, it's probably a course that you know well, an area where you probably feel comfortable.
Yeah, obviously I played a lot of desert golf. They'd redone that golf course a couple of times since I moved, so I hadn't actually played I think they call it the Legends course now. So I hadn't really played it, but the routing was kind of still the same. They just sort of done some around the edges to the routing, and to the tees and the length of the holes and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, desert golf is always, especially in Scottsdale, there's a few little quirks to it. One being when you actually hit it into the desert, the sort of like whether it can be, you can get a little bit of luck there or a little bit unlucky. And the other one is the valley. Like putting in Scottsdale it's a whole nother animal. There's the same thing that goes on in Vegas where the whole area is just sloping down towards either the Strip in Vegas or it's downtown Phoenix. But when you're there, it feels flat. You know what I mean? You don't realize it's like when you go into those Ripley's Believe It or Not houses and they walk you around, then all of a sudden the water goes uphill and all that sort of stuff. It's the same sort of principle where you look at a putt that you think it's flat and it's always breaking to the valley. So it's always, it can be a pretty frustrating place to putt around and you need a little bit of luck. And, top 5 is, top 5 in anything, you got to play well. So you can't just sort of go out there and just sort of play okay. And I sort of played okay and the last round never really got going and that was that.
They don't make it easy. 5 spots. Bit of a close shop.
No, they don't, and I think they're getting rid of it altogether. I mean, they're the rumours. I think the rumours are they're getting rid of all Monday qualifying, getting rid of Q. I don't know whether they'll get rid of Q School, but basically, yeah, they just want the same guys out there in perpetuity, I think.
And assuming that it's on, do you expect to give it another rattle for 2025?
Yeah, I mean, I'll do a lot of Monday qualifiers this year. Try and play my way on that way, similar to Greg Chalmers and a few of the other guys. There always seems to be one or two guys that do it each year. So that's what I'm working towards. But then, my son's heading off to college mid next year. So with both kids not living at home, I'll be sort of looking around for something else to do rather than sit around waiting for them to come home. So maybe I'll be spending a lot more time back down in Hobart, or hopefully I'll be splitting time between the Champions Tour and 7 Mile Beach.
So finally, in terms of the competitive recap, I believe you recently escaped the clutches of 7 Mile Beach to compete at the Vic Open at 13th Beach. A strong start. Yeah. I believe the conditions were quite challenging by the time the end of the week came.
Yeah. It was like it blew. It was ridiculous. So we got the classic, super windy afternoon draw. Where it's kind of calm for the whole day, the day before, and then in the morning, and then it just kicks up, and it was crazy. And there's two golf. There's the creek course and the beach course. The beach course is the one that's really exposed and sort of has a little bit more linksy, if you like, while the creek course is a little bit, more forgiving and it's a bit easier to score on. So, it's a great tournament. I actually quite enjoy playing there, but for some reason the wind just wore me out. By the end of it, I was kind of over it, to be honest. There's only so many knockdown shots you can hit. You feel like everything's on your left side. Everything, you don't see a ball go close for 2.5 days. You're like, well, this really isn't fun. It's like when they had the European Tour, and we'd always be wanting to play links golf courses leading up to the British Open, and then when we finally did get to play 2 weeks of links golf leading up to the British Open, everyone was sick of it by the time they got to the British Open and wanted to, it sort of whittled everyone out emotionally and mentally. That's how I felt after 3 days.
I was interested to see that Sue O won the women's section, and it was a real lesson in having a score in the clubhouse and being worth quite a lot. She posted early, I believe, and everyone just went backwards.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. And they didn't just go backwards a little bit. I mean, I think she was 5, 6, 7 shots behind. They only had like 9 holes to play, or she probably had a couple of holes to play, and they had 9 holes to play, and then it all fell apart pretty quickly. It was pretty horrific. I mean, you get into those conditions, and then a lot of the times you're relying on getting up and down every hole, and you sort of dodge along, and you do it. You get a few up and down, and you make a couple of tricky up and downs, and then there's a couple of easy holes. But then all of a sudden, when you start missing them, and then all of a sudden you feel like, well, I'm never going to make a par again. I'm just going to bogey every hole because I can't hit a green because it's like unplayable.
Yeah, mate. That's kind of welcome to my world, links golf in Ireland.
Exactly. Well, there you go.
It's week in, week out. Well, listen, finally, what other plans remain for 2025 from a playing perspective for yourself?
Yeah, I'm going to play a bunch of Monday, Tuesday qualifiers for the Champions Tour. Hopefully I'll get into the Senior PGA. They generally sort of give you a start. Your first year, you're 50. So I wasn't 50 when the tournament was on last year. And have a crack at that. Probably do Q School again, play a few tournaments in Australia. And spend a lot of time down at 7 Mile Beach as well. It'll be a little bit of travel. And
where's the Seniors PGA on this year?
That's a good question. I don't even know. Okay. That's how much I follow.
I'll Google that.
Maybe I should know. Maybe just edit that out in case they say, I'm not inviting that guy. I don't even know where it is.
Well, hang on a second. We can always drop in the answer.
Quick, look it up.
Listen, we've teased the listeners enough already, so we really should finally get on to the main event, namely the golfing oasis that is 7 Mile Beach Golf Development. I've managed to keep listeners somewhat abreast of developments, periodic updates from Messrs Clayton, Pont and De Vries, but it's great to get a live update from yourself. The first question, I suppose, and I'm really assuming that your air mile status has received a bump since the 7 Mile Beach construction project started.
It has. It's hard work to keep that platinum status sitting at the back of the plane, though. I'll give you that. You got to put in a lot of work, and I've put in a lot of work to keep it. So it's been, you get a few perks, but it's jet lag. I used to think jet lag didn't bother me, but now I'm starting to feel like, it wears you out. But that's all right. It's for a good cause.
And what's the route from Charlotte to Hobart?
It's either Dallas or Sydney, Dallas, Melbourne, or it's LA, Melbourne, LA, Sydney.
Okay.
From Charlotte. It's not too bad. It's not too bad.
One thing I must say is your audio diaries have been a great addition to your 7 Mile Beach output. In your most recent installment, you alluded to Chinese whispers, hearing stuff that is purportedly happening at or with the development. I'm just wondering what some of the wilder suggestions that you've either heard or read about.
And that was more directed at there's sort of this because I don't update often because there's not much to update on because we're just growing in a golf course and growing in a fescue golf course. There were sort of some things going it's like, oh, it's not happening, it's a disaster and all this sort of stuff, which is completely untrue because, we're actually doing a lot and there is so much that goes into this as far as from a regulatory standpoint with local council and building surveyors and all that sort of stuff that is sort of beyond your control. That you can appear to be doing nothing when, we're actually doing quite a lot and we're very close to so we're going to have an announcement in the next sort of couple of weeks about preview play. There's going to be a preview play period that's sort of going to be through April through November. And I think we'll be looking at having the actual, opening, if you like, early November this year. But so we're probably going to do a 14-hole loop. There's one hole that has had quite a lot of wind damage, and that's the fourth. And it's sort of, you can't sort of get around. You can play 14 holes without playing those top holes, but you can't play. So the fourth tee it's ironically, it's the highest point on the golf course, and it's the one that just gets smashed from both sides. So we've had to, we're going to have to go in there and resod it and rebuild it once we get closer to opening. But, you sort of can't get equipment up there at the moment because the turf quality has just been a bit rough. But that it's just that one, you sort of, when you're going through the whole process, you learn so much once the actual turf is growing and you start to realize bits that get exposed or get more wind shear and the way the wind works across the top of the turf, all these sort of things you kind of can't anticipate for that you're sort of having to adjust on the ground. And we also made the decision of we really want the turf to be pretty well established before we have any preview play. First impressions are important. So, I've been on this project now for 13 years. So I figured another 6 months is not, even though as desperately I wanted to get out there and get people on it because there are some really playable, great looking holes from a condition wise, we figured we'll just give it another 6 months and really get it right.
So you spent Christmas 2024 in Hobart, I believe, playing some rough golf and indeed getting married.
Yep. That was 2024. Probably didn't expect that to be happening 6 years ago. That was not the trajectory I was on, but getting remarried was awesome. It was nice to have the family around. Sarah loves Tasmania as much as I do, so she had the great idea of getting one of the Mona ferries and taking it out for the day or for a few hours, and that was just the easiest wedding ever. Everything's self-contained on a boat. You didn't have to worry about decoration or anything because if anyone who's been down to Hobart and had the privilege or had an opportunity to take one of the Mona Romas out to the Mona Museum, those boats are just spectacular. So it was a great time. And then, I got to play a little bit of golf. The course it's interesting because I've now played it a few times and you always think, well, it's going to be good. How good is it? And then when I actually finally got to play it with the flags in, it's, and you can take my, grain of salt with what I'm going to say, I guess, because I'm so invest in the project, but the course really is amazing. It's staggeringly good. There is so many shots that for a player of my caliber that are exciting. You know what I mean? It's not just when you play professional golf, it can just be a bit like 9-iron green, 4-iron green. There's nothing that really that you have your sort of heart in your mouth waiting to see where it lands. There's only a few shots on a few golf courses, and I was really surprised how many shots where you were sort of not 100% sure, or it sort of had that thrill of actually hitting the shot versus just, okay, well, here's another wedge from 150 yards or whatever it is. And I think that's the same for all levels. Everyone sort of had that feeling. So we're even more excited about, letting everyone else play and see what their opinion is, because even though my biased opinion, I've played a lot of golf courses and it's really, really good.
And what was the feedback from the rest of the golfers in the family?
Yeah, I mean, they're probably all a bit biased too. What was not really? They just all loved it. I'm trying to think of trying to give you a sort of what criticisms there would be, but so far it's been fun for all levels. No one's really losing any golf balls, which was sort of a nice surprise. There's plenty of width. It's actually interesting because when I would go out there with some of the younger guys, on the crew, they just spray it. You know what I mean? Like you've never seen, like, I don't know, you probably play with some young kids at your golf course and like they're in their 20s, they have all this speed and you can't believe how far offline they can hit it. So I'm going out there playing with some of these kids and I'm watching, I'm just like, I never thought you could hit a golf ball over there. Like there's no way you're going to be able to get around here, if you're going to hit it that far offline. And then when I go out there with my dad or some just regular golfers, dad's like an 18 handicap, was a pretty good player, or someone like they no matter how bad a shot they hit, they never missed a fairway. And not to the point where you can't miss a fairway, but they weren't just losing balls. You know what I mean? There was some, and so that was good because I know some of the criticisms of some of these newer golf courses is, you lose golf balls. You're going into the pro shop after 9 holes to get another dozen balls. So hopefully that's not going to happen. You can get around with a wedge. Well, you can get around with a putter a lot. Like there aren't a lot of bunkers. There aren't a lot of forced carries. So that's good for the average player. But, a lot of the people I've been playing with are good players and they just, they just find it thrilling, which is good.
Happy days. A mutual friend of ours visited the site some time ago, actually, but he suggested to me yesterday when I was talking to him that 7 Mile Beach may be the love child of Portmarnock Golf Club and Ballybunion Golf Club. Would you concur?
Yeah, I think I've always my comparison always been the South Course or 7 Mile Beach, as we're calling it. We'll get into that later. Is really like a big Irish links. That's it feels like the dunes on the high, like it has some of that subtlety down near the beach, but really the North Course is what you consider traditional Scottish links land, and the 7 Mile Beach course is really, it has that grandeur, that scale of the big Irish links, which is not a bad comparison. Like if you can get into those sort of comparisons, you've done a pretty good job, I think.
Yeah, I'd take that. Those two particular names dropped into conversation. You're just back from Hobart, as you said. I understand that Messrs Clayton and De Vries were also in situ for a spot of bunker detailing, but the planning of same.
Yeah, actually, funnily, we played quite a bit with Mike De Vries, and it was the first time I realised that, like all architects, he's designed the golf course that suits his game. Because I had no idea, and then I played with him. Every tee shot's like this little bullet cut, low cut, bullet. And then every tough tee shot on the golf course, you require like a flat bullet cut. So there's a couple of really tough holes, like really tough tee shots. And that's the one thing about the golf course that I like. It has, for like a player, like for a really good player, there's a couple of tee shots where you're like, man, I've got to hit a great shot. Like I don't have an option. Like there's plenty of room if you play it way back, but if you're really going to take it on, it's got to be a great shot. And of course, the shot you require is a bullet fade, and that is Mike De Vries' game. So there's no high draws out there. There's nothing like that.
What's his game like, just in general?
Solid. Yeah. No, very solid. Yeah, keeps it out in front of him. Very. Yeah, he could. He looks like he's growing up in Scotland, that's for sure.
Okay, well, I guess Michigan is pretty windy.
Mm.
So you have a plan that Mike's due back to do a bit of bunker detailing prior to opening, yeah?
Yeah. So it was all those detailing stuff that you want to get right. So we were sort of having a look at the edges, seeing which ones are ready, seeing whether there was any changes. I think there was talk of maybe filling in one of the bunkers because it wasn't, even though we only have 31 or 32 on the whole golf course, there was one that was a bit superfluous to the hole, so we might have one less. But yeah, just the detail works, all the sort of things that tie everything together, and that's what Mike's De Vries is obsessed about, and that's probably what makes him so good at what he does. It's not just seeing a hole and building a particular hole, but it's how it ties into the landscape and everything that goes with that. And I think all the great golf courses, whether you're aware of it or not, the attention to detail is such a high priority. And Mike's going to have the same attention to detail for us at 7 Mile Beach, which puts a bit of pressure on the crew to get everything right, but also it's worth it in the end.
So I'm assuming you're probably gone sand flash as opposed to revetting?
Yeah. It'll just be sort of tucking the turf under, getting sort of like a few jagged lines. They're not really like scraped out waste bunkers, if you like. They have a little bit more traditional shape, but they'll have a little bit more character to them. Then, I mean, basically, you seed the bunker, you cut out below the lip, let the lip establish, and then just sort of go in there and fold the turf around and get it and get the look that he wants. But yeah, no, there's nothing revetted and they're not really blowout bunkers either.
Yeah. I understand that curator Too Good and the extended team have had to endure some elemental dramas in the form of wind, as you've mentioned, and indeed a lack of precipitation. What can you tell us about these challenges?
Yeah, I mean, we're just in a rain shadow. It's been incredibly dry. They got a little bit unlucky right in the middle, right when they were finishing the golf course off and the seeding. We had probably one of the driest 3 or 4 month stretches on record, which is not ideal, combined with one of the windiest 3 months we've ever had. So you had sort of exposed seed, if you like, that, and it was interesting. A lot of the areas that didn't take so great was because of wind shear. It literally just blew the edge of the seed off, if you know what I mean. And this is really unusual. Like, we do not get wind like this, or like that for you might get the odd day, but you don't get a continuous week on week, week out, which we had through sort of, middle of last year. So it just, they've been through it. But on the flip side, it means what is established and what's going to be established is going to be an incredibly resilient, great playing surface. It's just taken longer than what we wanted. But, as I said, what I've played so far and what I've seen is, I think everyone's going to love it.
Geographically, though, Hobart is in the roaring 40s, so no great surprise that there was a bit of wind.
Yeah, but Hobart, like, we don't get the wind like Cape Wickham and like King Island. That's a whole nother level. Like, that's, we don't get it. Like, we'll have. Now, you go weeks on end where it's just perfect weather in Hobart. Traditionally, you can get summer can get a little windy, and then going into fall, and then really winter is generally pretty good. So that's why it was unusual to get that combination of like heavy winds through winter. But no, Hobart's not too bad. It's pretty protected. While obviously, if you look at Barnbougle, that's more on the north coast. That's sort of Bass Strait, west coast. That's where you just get smashed.
Yeah.
And the northerly comes down. It's a lot hotter if you're up in the north of the state. So we don't really get the super hot winds. We get the odd day, but the northwesterly is the bad one. The southerly in the summer is just sort of a light breeze. But then, when a change comes through, the southerly buster, as it's called, is the one that'll you'll get absolutely smashed up on the hill there. But generally, it's going to be less wind, much less wind than King Island, and quite a bit less wind than the north of the state. But you get some good days though. We have to hit that bullet fade off every hole.
Listen, I think power supply has proved a bit bothersome as well at one point or the other.
Well, unfortunately, we're kind of running everything's kind of off grid down there. So you're running on generators and solar and stuff like that, which is all fine. Like, it's just sort of, you just have to be constantly going around filling up tanks with diesel, which is not like the ideal. It takes a while for any of these sort of state infrastructure projects to come along. You sort of go in a queue. So we're about to be put in the queue soon. So hopefully by the end of the year, we have all our water infrastructure and power infrastructure to the site. So that sort of gives us another tick, if you like, to make sure that when we go on to building the second golf course, we're never going to have any problems of not having as much water as we want or not having the power. I mean, the power really isn't that big of a deal. It's just not ideal. Like, when your generator goes down, it becomes a big deal. But like, we had that happen and had to get it repaired. So your pump doesn't work for a week, and then you're hoping that you don't cop one of the hottest weeks of the year or whatever. I mean, that it didn't really affect us that much, but all those sorts of redundancies you want to have in place, which we will have by the end of the year, which is going to be a sigh of relief for me, that's for sure.
Pump doesn't work equals irrigation doesn't work equals...
Correct.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, water.
What's the forecast? Straight on to meteorology.
Exactly. Yeah, it's funny. Yeah.
Listen, your 7 Mile socials have been keeping us up to date with some of the comings and goings on the development. You appear to have been able to extend opportunities to some interested locals, and indeed some not so local, during the course of the construction and growing periods. How have the new recruits panned out?
Yeah, everyone, it's been interesting actually, because it's a tough build, right? If you're like, when they were doing irrigation, and you're copping a real southerly buster, and you're in a trench, and you're up to your shoulders in a trench trying to weld pipe. Meanwhile, the sand is just like just buffeting you like stinging your eyes, the whole thing, and it's cold in the middle of winter. It's not it's not an easy job. And interesting, all the people that have come down and helped out, the only ones that are left are the people that weren't turf guys. The turf guys, they want to be on their mower. They want to go back to have their break, go home at 3:00. But when you're building a golf course, you sort of have to have a little bit of flexibility. And it's really been the guys that have come down, and girls who have had passion for the project. And they're the ones that have stuck around. And they're not necessarily, they didn't come in as like having any skill having done this, but they've learnt on the job. And now we have like an awesome crew. And they've been through it. And it's been great to watch them. People just heard about the project on social media or around town, like, I want to be involved in this, and they put in the hard yards, and now that is all going to bear fruit, because I'm sure they're going to get to play it quite a bit as well.
Well, you spoke about the idea of approachability, and I think that's testament to both your approach to the project and wanting to give a little bit back to the locals.
Yeah, I mean, it's important. It's public land. The only reason I ever thought to do this was because the land is so great for golf. And I just thought, well, like, you've got to build this here. There's this amazing parcel of land for golf. Let's do it. There wasn't really that much other motivation factor. It's just like, someone's got to do it. No one's done it. I guess it's going to be me, type of attitude. But I also would look back to like one of my other partners. We grew up playing golf down there. We grew up playing at Royal Hobart, and we always thought, like, if you did build an amazing golf course, I wouldn't want a young Stuart or a young Matt to be like, you can never get on there. So I think it's really important to have local access and just build something we're all kind of proud of in the end.
Much like with the growing process, I believe you're assiduously working through a structural build program in terms of the built environment. I believe the Greens team have recently moved into their newly appointed shed.
Yeah. Well, not yet. Don't get too excited.
I beg your pardon.
To get
it's still a work in progress.
It's still a work in progress. It's the longest shed build in history. A lot of that has to do with the fact that I'm not sure what it's like in the UK, but basically you have a building surveyor who classifies what your building's going to be, and then under that classification you have all the regulations you've got to meet. And for some reason, the building surveyor classified our shed as some sort of like not like any other. So if you took like the things we have to do from an ADA access and parking and lighting and all this sort of stuff, there's no shed in Australia that has had to do it. So it's added this sort of layer of complexity to the job that has been very frustrating, and it's also delayed the project or the build quite a bit, because as opposed to just slapping up a shed and putting in an office and putting some lights and away you go, there's been all this sort of other compliance stuff that has taken some time, and then you sort of run up against Christmas break, and in Australia, if you're not sort of done by the second week of January, second week of you're probably not looking to be getting anything sort of back on site till. But I mean, we've had some great contractors, and they're doing an amazing job. It's just from the outside looking in, you're always just like, are we ready? But we've been very, as I said, 14 years. What's another couple of months for a shed? But now they have such a pristine setup. I mean, they have this. They have 2 shipping containers. They've got a caravan, and they have like a little mobile office. I mean, what more could you need?
That sounds luxurious.
Yeah, exactly.
Luxurious
compared to where they started. It is
a tent or something.
Yeah.
I know you hosted some guys from your own golf club, Charlotte Golf Club, there recently. What can you tell us about the, customer-facing facilities?
Oh yeah, so we're going to go. We're going to go with the whole temporary setup. Sort of, a marquee. We have a storage container that has all the merchandise and stuff like that, and then we have a caravan that is a bar caravan, basically serve a bit of food and a bit of drink and all that sort of stuff, and that'll all be down near the 18th tee. because where the main construction is going to go on the next phase, which is down near the first tee or the dune below the first tee, we kind of we didn't want people to be coming in and having to like deal with construction everywhere. So there's this area that was going to be a potential, originally, I think, an 18th tee that ended up sort of built, but then deciding not to use it. So then we've turned it into sort of a temporary marquee area, if you like, down near the beach. So you actually start on 18 and finish on 17 when you do the loops and during the preview play period. And it's really nice down there. It's right on the beach. It's, unfortunately you can't build anything permanent down there because of a few inundation and coastal vulnerabilities and all those sorts of things. They don't want you building anything in an area that could possibly get hit by a tidal wave or whatever. So everything has to be up on the hill. But I think if you were going to build a clubhouse, you'd probably build it right down on the beach, but you can't. So I guess we'll have this temporary setup for a while. Everyone gets to enjoy, and then once the construction up on towards the first tee gets going and gets finished, then everything will move up there, I reckon. But that's the start. That's the starting point.
So I understand that your partners, the former tour player Stuart Ginn and Dr. Brian McNamee, were instrumental in realising the 7 Mile project. Perhaps you might expand on how important their support and counsel has been to you over the past few years.
Yeah, so I grew up playing with Stuart Jr., so Stuart's son. So we've been on this project from day one, and so the Gin family office has been instrumental in sort of when we sort of went through the period where we had the permit and the other investors sort of were not that interested in pursuing it. It was Stuart and I that or the Gin family office that sort of decided that we'd keep plugging along and get substantial commencement and see how it went. And now we've sort of took it to a phase where some big decisions made on a second golf course and the timing of that, whether we're going to try and do it as quickly as possible. And obviously, if you're going to roll out a big project like that, accommodations and a second golf course, and you're trying to get from A to C quickly as opposed to taking 10 years to do it, you have to bring in other partners. Now, Brian was involved in the first group, if you like. He was one of the first investors, and then he sort of was one of the group that kind of didn't pursue it back, whatever it was, 2015, I think. But then I think when he came down, he loves golf. Like he built an amazing company. He's one of Australia's sort of really great business minds and business leaders, but he's also a golf tragic, which sort of helped us. But he's a member at Tara Edie, and I think spending some time at Tara Edie, and then sort of when I had him come down to have a look, he's always been good friends with Clayton. So when we were sort of looking to, bring in another partner with Stuart, Gin and I, or the Gin family office and I, we, Mike said, well, why don't you have Brian come down for another look? So Brian came down, and I think he saw the potential, seeing what Rick Kane has done at Tara Edie and Tearai. I think he saw the potential of wow, this could be, on the same level as golf course quality. I mean, I'm not sure we're going to try and, spend hundreds of millions of dollars like Rick did building this, golfing oasis, but we can definitely do something that we'll all be really proud of. And I think that's what got Brian excited. He could see that he could do something like that in Hobart, which is a great city. I mean, that's the big difference between us and a lot of places, is Hobart is an incredible city now. Outstanding restaurants, amazing hotels. Like, we're 5 minutes from the airport. There's, 3 or 4 major airlines that fly in there, 2.5 million passenger movements, going to be 4 million within sort of the next 5 years. So it's a really, Hobart, is a key for us, because it's just, you're not just feeling like you're getting there and you're kind of stuck. It's interesting at places like Bandon, they keep adding courses, which is great. But then it's like, we're going to be here for a week, and then after 3 or 4 days, you're like, what are we doing? Like, we've got to go and do something. I'm going stir crazy. All I'm doing is playing golf. So hopefully, the attraction of Hobart, just being, we're basically in Hobart. I mean, really, we're 20 minutes from downtown, and I think that'll be a big attraction for not just for your regular golf tourists, but for the people who, probably, are coming down with their partner and, just coming down from the weekend and, One will go and play golf, and the other one will go and do something else in Hobart. But everyone will be happy.
Your inbox info at sevenmilebeach.com.au must be inundated with requests for preview play access, asking about opening dates and when the booking process is going to start.
Yep, they are. It is correct.
That's good.
No, it's great. I think you're always, we're thinking through all the different ways we want to do preview play. Maybe probably overthought it a bit. And then I was sort of texting with one of the guys the other day, and I was like, well, maybe no one will want to come. Like, we're putting all this time into like really wanting to do this right. We'll probably send out the announcement. We'll get no bookings. So, I mean, maybe we've overthought this too much. But there is sort of a bit of a groundswell of excitement in Australia in particular. I think it's sort of time for it, really. I mean, everyone, like Barnbougle, I think, had their 10-year? No, that was lost, or 20-year anniversary must have been. Just the other day, and Barnbougle's has been a fantastic business, a fantastic property. It does everything really well. It's really heaps of people play it. I don't know, it does 50,000-60,000 rounds a year. But I also think there's sort of like a bit of a built up pent up demand for like, well, what's the next one? Where's the new one? And I think we're slotting in at the right time for that. And I think people do see the fact that you can get in and out in a day, or you can get into Hobart and it's so accessible compared to Barnbougle, which is, it's harder to get to from Hobart than it is from Melbourne, to be honest. You got to drive nearly 4 hours or 3 hours and 45 minutes from Hobart. So I think, I think there's a lot of people that are intrigued by how, the pictures, and it looks all great, and you can make anything look good on a drone picture these days. But I think it's shockingly beautiful and right in Hobart. So I think it has those two big box ticks that everyone's excited to come down and witness. Then we just have to do the job of actually making sure they want to come back.
For what it's worth, I was playing golf last weekend in my home course, and we were just chatting about a mutual friend that is actually over in Australia currently. And the dude turns to me and he goes, have you heard about that new golf course they're building down in Hobart? So you've got cut through over here too. So,
yeah, I mean, that's the internet age, right? I mean, you wouldn't have known 25 years ago, but now you, through Instagram and social media, you're aware of, and if you're into that sort of thing, you know of all the golf courses that are coming online, whether it's, the Tree Farm, or whether it's the new course, Broome Sedge, or whether it's some architect that's just announced that you've been following and you're excited about, where before you might never have heard of it until you're actually literally in the area. So, I think Sweetens Cove was the first, I would say, Instagram golf course, if you like. That was the first development that became a social media where everyone was posting pictures and everyone was posting, look where I'm going today, and they'd have a 13-hour drive, or wherever they're driving from all across, the country to go to Sweetens Cove. I think that was the first one that, took advantage of all that. I'm sort of been, I don't post, I mean, I do the social media myself. Like, it's not like we have some, grand social media plan. It's just me posting the odd picture that I get and just trying to trickle, a little bit of interesting information, but I'm not really pushing it that much. But once we get it, once we know our dates, I think I'll be, I might hand it on to someone who knows what they're doing, and there'll be a little bit more frequently updates. But at the moment, you just got to put up with my lame effort. Sorry.
Well, you're doing okay. You have started to tease us a little bit more to various socials, introducing us to new holes, such as the one with no bunkers that runs parallel to the beach without evidence of even one bunker. Clayton did recently chime in on Twitter confirming that there are 5 completely unbunkered holes and 10 unbunkered greens. So you said you'd 30-odd bunkers on site. Surely, Matt, that's going to make the course far too easy.
Well, I would say the 6th hole is going to be the hardest hole in Australia, like hands down. Like, if you play it from, like, most people are going to play it as a par 5. I mean, on the scorecard, I think we'll have the option 4/5, because it just requires 2 really strong shots. And I always remember the Tom Doak quote where I think it was something along the lines of, there always has to be one hole that differentiates a scratch golfer from a pro golfer. where, it requires a drive and a 4-iron, or it's a 3-iron par 3. And it's like, you have a lot of scratch golfers that can get around, but it's really, the tour pro is going to be able to handle that, while a scratch golfer is going to, it's going to feel more like, magic to be able to hit a 3-iron on the green consistently.
The eighth at Barnbougle comes to mind.
The eighth. Oh, yeah. With a split fairway.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, but really, all the bunkers that are on the golf course are purely strategic. There's no eye candy, there's no flashy bunkers, there's no bunker complexes, if you like. They're purely there to help with the strategy of the hole, because of there is so much exposed sand, and there is Marram exposed sand and all that sort of stuff. There's so much eye candy that you don't need any extra bunkers to create any visual impact. They just get lost. So all the bunkering is purely strategic, and when to be honest, when you play a lot of golf courses, there aren't very many strategic bunkers. There's the odd one, and then the rest are there just to, give you some visual intimidation or to make the hole look pretty. So we're fortunate with our side. It's like we don't need anything extra to make it look pretty, but, every now and again, a centerline bunker or something to stop you from going really in the crap is warranted.
I also came across another picture, what can only be described as a boomerang green. What can you tell us about that particular hole?
Yeah, that's the 9th hole, and it's interesting. I remember having a conversation with Mike about that, because that's bunkerless as well. When he built it, that was the epiphany for me when I realized that, golf course, like everyone, there's a 2-bit golf course architect. You know what I mean? It's like, oh yeah, you're out there, tee here, green here. Yeah, it's obvious. Here's the routing and all that sort of stuff. And like, obviously, a great routing is sort of the magic essence of a golf course. But being able to see that a hole could potentially go here is not that difficult. So now, okay, you've got your tee, and like, here's your green site. But then what is the green? Like, what exactly is it going to be? Are you going to build something that you haven't built before? Are you going to build something that hasn't been repeated on the golf course? Is it going to be inspired by something but not considered a copy of something? Like, there are so many things. And when you're doing it over, like, you've got to do it 18 times, and you've probably done it, hundreds of times through your career, to not have something that's like, oh, well, this is a Mike De Vries green because I've seen it, 10 times, or this is the 16th at Augusta green, or even all the template holes, which just, Barrett's or something, where it's being inspired but not being the same as. That's when I realized that, no, actually, like, it's an incredible amount of imagination and talent to not become redundant and boring and do the same thing over and over again. Because I was asking him, like, what made you think to put this green here? And he's like, well, the way the sort of the dune sort of shapes around, and that sort of made me think that, like, it would be nice to swing the boomerang in there. And then, because, like, you're really just looking at a bunch of sand and a hill, and there's nothing to the layman to look at that and be like, no, this should be a boomerang green. But he'd given it a lot of thought. He'd given a lot of consideration, and he was taking inspiration from everything in the surrounding to come up with that particular green. And it was just sort of like a wow factor for me. We're just like, okay, yeah, no, like, there's no chance. Like everyone's like, you could get into golf course architecture. I'm like, no, I couldn't. Absolutely, no, 0% chance I could do that. I couldn't come up with one green, let alone hundreds of them.
Well, talking about that, did you have you had any playing around on the big machines yet? The last time we spoke, you had just about organised them to get on site. Did you try any sand proing or anything like that?
I'm a skid steer guy.
Okay.
I like a skid steer. You know what I mean? I like to get in there and the big bull. I don't know how he does anything on a big bulldozer. Like, that just was. I mean, I got up on one of those. I'm just like, how do you shape anything? I could push a remotely flat area and make it probably not flat. So maybe I'd be the perfect guy to put on site. So I find the flat, it was like find the village idiot and make him jump on the machines, who'll build the greatest green ever. That's me. That's me. I would just, go and tell him to build a flat road and you'll get a great green. That's how good I am on a dozer.
Okay. So you know your limits.
Oh yeah. I'm always well aware of my own limits. That's why I've never tried to impose my ideas or anything on the building of this golf course, because let the experts do expert stuff.
Well, you had mentioned previously that you did say to the boys that at some point in time you're going to say no. It sounds like you probably didn't say no at any point.
Did I say no? No, I don't think I ever said no. Like there was a lot of gentle encouragement.
Okay.
I'm not a no type of guy, maybe, but yeah, no, it's been very collaborative. Like Mike and Mike are very collaborative, even though they're very what's the word? They're like they have a way they want to do things, and once they make a decision, they're going to talk you into their decision, but you feel like you're collaborating as you're agreeing with them.
Political, I suppose, is probably the correct
Yeah.
the correct word there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There was another hole. I might be dreaming about this, but is there a hole that has two greens?
Yeah, yeah. So the eighth hole has two green sides, and it was interesting when we were, walking the hole and deciding on the green side and all that sort of stuff. It was always sort of I'll call it the left green or the long green, but there was huge burn piles all over the golf course, so you couldn't get a clear sight line to a lot of places. So there just happened to be one night we had like 10 burn piles burnt on where the eighth was going to be, and there just happened to be this. When you looked over there, you kind of thought, well, you kind of have to have the green side there. But there was this sort of conversation around where so 8 and 9 run the same direction. If you play to the right green, 8 and 9 then become almost exactly the same distance in the same direction. So it was sort of like the idea was to have, if you went to the left green where you played off a front tee on 9 or the original tee on 9, and that sort of made it break up the distances. One became a little bit stronger, the other one became a little bit shorter, as opposed to having two holes that are exactly the same length. But then you kind of looked at that right green site and you're just like, is this going to be one of those ones where people are going to stand here and they're going to look over there and it's like, why didn't they build the green over there? So then I sort of said, well, just build it. Like we're out here anyway, we may as well. So there's two greens.
Cool. So did you consider at any point in time having a spare, a 19th hole?
Not really. Not really. I guess we'll have a whole spare 18 soon. So, no, it was, I guess you could put in extra par threes all over the place if you really wanted to. That's sort of like the easiest thing about the site. There's par threes all over the place, but having a connective full 18 and being able to walk around it, not feel like you're a billy goat, that was the real challenge. And that's what they've done a really good job of. But there's, the holes that aren't holes that Clayton's always, puts on X, is there's a whole different routing if you wanted to play the golf course a different way. It's open for that.
Nice. How about playing it backwards?
I don't know. I don't think you could play it backwards. There'd be some, the craftiness of the routing is so you go from up to 60 feet of elevation down to the beach, right? So, and you only do it twice, and you do it on 2 downhill holes. So you never have a steep walk up a hill. We have 2 so one's the fifth hole, which I think I've posted, which is just a spectacular par 4 that goes back down to the beach, to the hole that is like the 6th hole, which is the bunkerless one. And then the 14th, which is the par 3 that is quite an elevated tee shot, which was the first hole that Mike built, which is a spectacular par 3 in amongst the dunes, no bunkers and all that sort of stuff. So that was the sort of the 2 pieces of the routing, which made you to get from basically the top to the bottom without ever really feeling like you're walking uphill. And I think that was sort of a bit of a stroke of genius, really, on that site, because it does have some big dunes on it, but at no point do you feel like it's a tough walk. And that was because of those 2 holes, really. So if you played it in reverse, that would be brutal.
Yeah, well, I momentarily forgot about the elevation change, and ideally a reversible golf course should be pretty flat. So
I'd imagine. Yeah.
I take that question back for fear of looking stupid.
But then the Clayton is always, he's always blunt and pretty astute. He's just like, well, wouldn't you just build the best 18 holes you can? The best 18, why would you try and make it reversible? Like, I know it's a bit of a fad and people are doing it. And obviously the old course is, famously has its reversible day. But yeah, he's probably right. I mean, you can be as gimmicky as you want, but why not just build the best golf course possible? And that should be enough for everyone.
The same gentleman, Mr. Clayton, has proffered perhaps the idea of, at some point in time in the future, a Aussie Open at 7 Mile Beach. Is that something you think would go down well with competitors and attendees alike?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're going to have an Australian Open in Tassie, it would have to be in Hobart, just from the logistics and the hotels and, proximity to the airport and the city. So, and, with 7 Mile Beach, the 36 holes there, you kind of have the potential quality of golf course. Like Hobart doesn't really have the quality of golf course, even though Royal Hobart a long time ago hosted I think it was in 64 or 67, I think Nicholas won. That's the only time it's been there, and I think there's a growing push that the Australian Open should move around Australia, at least every sort of 5 years or so, play somewhere outside of Melbourne and Sydney. Obviously, logically, being near the two big major population finance centres, it's where all the corporates want to be. It's a tough sell to be moving it all the time, but it would be nice to see it rotate out, even if it was every 10 years, and probably the logical place to have it would be in Hobart, and it will be the best course in Hobart. So, yeah, maybe. Who knows? I think it'd be awesome. I'd love to have it down there, but make sure it's soon so I can play in it. I mean, too late.
Listen, I'd like to move on to the drawing board at this juncture, as it were, for a quick chat about what you're now referring to as the North Course at 7 Mile Beach. I see you've dropped the 5 Mile Beach moniker. However, I suspect that the new course will still be on the 5 Mile Beach city side of the property.
Correct. It was more, people didn't know where it was in relation. They're like, oh, we know 7 Mile Beach, but they were thinking 5 Mile Beach was not part of 7 Mile Beach, or that it was like somewhere else, as opposed to basically the first of both holes are almost the same fairway. Like they're literally, it's the same piece of land. But on the peninsula, you've got 7 Mile Beach faces south, and 5 Mile Beach faces north. So I think just for sort of marketing, to make people understand, like, no, it's the same place. We'll just go 7 Mile Beach, North and South Course. But I don't think the South Course will ever be called the South Course. That'll be called 7 Mile Beach, and the other one will be called the North Course. Or it'll probably be called 5 Mile Beach. But then we don't have to come up with a new logo. We just keep the same logo. It's cheaper on the graphic design bill.
I hear you. Listen, you selected King Collins Dormer, obviously, but that may have been a surprise to some. They have, of course, been bubbling along very nicely of late. Probably best known by the golf tragics out there for Sweetens Cove in Tennessee, and of course the spectacular Landman Golf Club in Nebraska. It may have been easier for you to throw your lot in with a Coeur Cradshaw, Gil Hanse, or indeed the Renaissance design. Just wondering what USP or USPs attracted you to King Collins Dormer.
Well, I mean, there's actually there's a lot of reasons. So the first one is, I always felt like the success of Sandhills, the success of Barnbougle Dunes, or Pacific Dunes, or Bandon Dunes, they're all sort of projects that were sort of early on in an architect's career, and they really felt like it was a really important project to them. It wasn't just another project. It wasn't just another fee. And I'm not saying that's what those guys do, because they do turn down a lot of projects. But I think you understand what I'm trying to say, is that I felt like you want someone like, so De Vries was on site for 18 months. Like, he lived and breathed this project. Like, it wasn't just sort of like fitting it in between other jobs. He had a bunch of other jobs to do. He was there, and he just was obsessed with making this place as good as it could possibly be. And I think the result will be a testament to that. I'd been to Sweetens Cove. I had saw Landman. I'd met Rob. He's a fantastic guy. And I think working with good people is important. And I just knew that they'd built some really, really interesting golf courses, some really creative golf courses on terrible pieces of land. It's funny, when he showed me Landman, and it was purely by accident. I was going out to see Sandhills, and he was out there at the same time. He's like, well, why don't you swing by Landman? I'm going to be there on such and such a day. And it was actually the day we arrived in Omaha. So instead of driving out to Sandhills, immediately we drove up and had a look at Landman. And when I got there, and he was explaining, oh, it's an incredible piece of land. This is amazing. And I looked at it, and I'm just like, this is massive. Like, the scale of this place is like, this is not easy. This is impossible. Like, if you build a normal 40-yard wide fairway on any of this, it would just look like a little ribbon in a field, and like the scale of all the greens and the bunkers, everything had to be on such a massive scale to make it look right to your eye. And I remember having dinner at Sandhills with him, and he asked me, and that's basically what I said. I said, no, I think this is in a huge risk. Like you could do this and everyone could think it's a disaster. But it's been brilliant, and they did a fantastic job. And it just, I think given a really good piece of land, in which, I mean, 5 Mile Beach is, like, it's spectacular. They've never had that opportunity. Well, I think all these other guys have been thrown basically land where you could, you and I might be able to do a pretty good job. We probably wouldn't do good greens, but I think the rest of it would be pretty impressive. Everyone would think it was great. So I think I'm excited at how talented they are, and also giving them a great piece of land and giving them that opportunity. And I know they'll be obsessed about this project, and I know they'll put their heart and soul into it. And I think given the same opportunity as some of these other guys have had, everyone will know who. Most people do in sort of the golf course world, but the casual fan probably doesn't know. But I think they'll be shocked at what a great project they'll do. The other thing was like Doak's done Barnbougle, Crenshaw Core's done Lost Farm, they've done the short course. De Vries did Cape Wickham. Gill's probably too busy. I don't know. Like, the guy is just flat out doing all the USGA stuff, and it's probably a little bit expensive for us at the moment. But who knows? But I think just as far as making Tassie a golfing mecca, if you like, I think putting like OCM are doing Armend, I believe. So I think having the next, cab off the rank being a King Collins Dormer just adds to the whole loop of Tassie golf courses. So now you're getting to see not dissimilar pieces of property, and you're seeing the top 5, 6 architects in the world showing what they can do, and they've all done an amazing job. And I expect, Rob and Tad to do the same thing. So I think it's just sort of, it completes the vision for the whole state, I think. And I was kind of thinking about that quite a lot as far as like a visitor experience for people coming internationally. They can come to one place and experience the top, half a dozen architects in the world, all on fantastic pieces of land. I think that's intriguing, as opposed to just trotting out half a dozen Tom Doak courses, or, which should all be good, but there's just, there's different flavors for everyone.
Did you ever think that the words destination and golf would be used in conjunction with Tasmania?
Not growing up. No, not growing up at all. But it's sort of obvious. Like, once I didn't know how would I know when I was 16? I wouldn't know what a good golf course looked like. I was just sort of playing golf, and I had no idea. Even traveling around as professionally, I had no really crew of like when you would play all the courses in Ireland or in Scotland, they all kind of look the same. You know what I mean? It's like, well, this is good. Muirfield, that's great. Or, Sanders, that's great. Carnoustie, that's great. Troon, or if you're even down at Sandwich or places like that, you're always just like, oh, it's a links golf course. That's what they look like. But then when you get a little bit more educated and you understand, the different, how to put the difficulties of certain sites, the genius of certain routings and all those sorts of things, then you start looking at, when you're going for a drive, and you look out your window and you see sort of some dunes at a beachfront, you're like, wow, that would be good.
That's exactly what Ryan Node said to me recently, that he's got his wife pestered. That's a good site for golf. Shut up, Ryan. That's a good site for golf.
Yeah.
Once you know,
The interest, yeah, and it's interesting. Like when you drive out to Sandhills, you for the first 3 or 4 hours out of Omaha, it's kind of farmland and it's broad and it's kind of the land that landman's on. And then all of a sudden you hit the Sandhills and it's just like, oh yeah, of course they built an amazing golf course out here. You could build 1,000 amazing golf courses. But then conversely, you'd look and you'd be like, oh, there's a good par 4 over there, and you jump out of your car and you shoot it with your Bushnell and it's 3,000 meters away. You're like, oh, okay. maybe that's a little long for a par 4. So we're not have as much expertise as we think.
Now, mind you, with the likes of Aldrich Potgieter around the place, maybe 3,000 yards isn't too long for a par 4. You would submit your developed application for what was called the 5 Mile Beach site back in June 23.
You can call it 5 Mile Beach. I won't hold it against you.
Okay, no problem. On your last appearance in the pod, we spoke at length about the specifics of the development application process associated with your first golf course. I'm just wondering if the application process was any easier on the second go round.
It was a little easier because we're just doing purely a golf course. I remember interestingly, so when we went through the first development application process, there was some rezoning, there was attempts at residential. It was a really big project. It sort of started off as a golf project and ballooned into this sort of like massive sort of town planning project. So that was very different to what we wanted to, what we really sought out to do. Then, so getting the first permit for the golf course, it was a permitted use back then. So you're really just dealing with council. You didn't have to have any advertising or any of that sort of stuff. So it got all rezoned. That changed everything a bit. So it was trickier, but I think now we have a little bit of good faith and credit in the bank with Clarence Council and with local government and, state government. I think they see what's been created down there out of what they would think is just a degraded, environmental disaster zone that has no benefit or use to anyone really, apart from the odd recreational horse rider or which is, or a dog walker on the beach. But I think they come down now and see what a spectacular, like golf courses are. They're beautiful. You know what I mean? You stand on the top of the dune, you look out over to see all the different grasses and the different color palettes against the water and against the mountain. And it's just like, it's such a different environment. It's such a beautiful environment that I think they look at the 5 Mile side, which is even more degraded and like full of weeds and all sorts of sort of issues compared to the 7 Mile Beach. And they think, well, if they do that here, I'm in, you know what I mean? So I think they all, and there's always the economic benefits and, they see the hype around the course and the potential visitor numbers and all those sort of things, all those sort of things help. But I think in reality, we've built up enough, good faith and goodwill and credit on what we've done so far on the 7 Mile Beach side that I think it would seem like a no-brainer to a lot of them. So they're very supportive and very excited to vote for it, which, until you get down to that moment of the vote, you can easily, you can be as confident as you want, but you still have, 10 to 12 councillors, and you only just need to have 5 or 6 that, don't think it's a good idea, and then all your work's sort of down the drain. But thankfully, they saw the promise that, we think it has, and they unanimously, I think, supported, or unanimous and one person abstained because golf was considered a rich person's sport and couldn't possibly support it.
Even though it's going to be a public access facility, but how?
Yeah, and whatever.
So just as Clayton attended your initial meeting with the Tasmanian Premier, I believe Rob Collins was in Tasmania in conjunction with your final meeting with the Clarence Council for DA certification. That was probably a bit of help, I'd say.
Well, he was there for the meeting, like for the actual vote.
Oh.
So it was, there was no so I was just thinking, well, it's going to happen, so we may as well start now. So the next day, Tad and Rob got to actually, because they hadn't been on site, so it blew them away. I mean, they were so excited wandering around, and they were incredibly like they were blown away by 7 Mile Beach. They couldn't believe what an amazing job Mike had done on his dozer, because he's an absolute craftsman on that thing. It is unbelievable. I think I mention this all the time. I can't see how you have all these, grand, landscape prizes for, this park and this development. How one of these golf courses has not won international acclaim as landscape design awards, knowing what goes into the process, and that's exactly what it is. It's landscape design. I think all these guys should be getting, worldwide acclaim in that department.
I think, relatively speaking, people don't realize how much goes into it.
No, I don't. No, I don't think so.
Like as Bradley Klein said to me once upon a time, 95% of a golf course is under the ground.
Oh, yeah.
You've no idea what's there. So, as a layperson, how the hell can you have even an opinion about what the superintendent, the curator, is doing?
And also the areas where there is an amazing amount of work, and then the areas that are just purely nature, and to not know to have, I think Gil went and had a look, and he said to Mike, it was the 15th fairway or the 12th fairway. He's like, "Oh, I just love the 15th fairway. It has such natural rumples, and what an amazing piece of land." And that was purely built. Like it had didn't have anything in it. It was like it was flat near the water table. We had to dump a lot of sand on there just to make sure we didn't have any problems down the track. So that meant dumping all that sand on there. I mean, Mike had to shape in all the undulations, and then you've got someone like Gil Hanse who, paid him the ultimate compliment by saying it was like an awesome, natural-looking rumpled fairway, not knowing that he built it. So, yeah, like they do amazing stuff.
Do you expect King Collins Dormer to adopt a similar approach to construction as Mike and CDP adopted, namely outline routing, but very much designing the field and spending a lot of time getting it right in the dirt, as it were?
Yeah. I mean, that 100%. They have a larger crew, I guess. They have sort of like their 2 or 3 shapers, and, Mike was adamant that pretty much we had one shaper. We had like a couple of guys who were doing their apprenticeship, Lucas and Jurian. They weren't really, I mean, they were on dozers all day.
They got to do the practice range.
Exactly. Well, they got to just push huge amounts. Like the interesting thing is like 3 and 4 had that much work done. They spent months over there shaping up those fairways, yet because it was sort of land you couldn't use for golf. But the decision was like, well, if we can stay on this top ridge, that kind of just changed what 5, 6, and 7 could be. So there was a lot of earthworks up there, and they just did an amazing job sort of like filling in, taking highs, bringing it down to the lows, sort of smudging it out, if you like. But all the bulk prep for that was Jurian. He spent months out there, I swear, on those 2 holes.
Grunt work, I suppose, is the description.
Yeah, so King Collins have a little bit more. They're sort of a complete design build. So they'll bring over, sort of their 4 or 5 guys, and and I think now knowing, how to clear the site better, deal with the burns, how to, you do things a little bit differently than what we did them at 7 Mile Beach. So having had that knowledge, I think we can attack this one a little bit differently and get things to go along a little bit quicker.
So I'm assuming you've got some tree removal to do there on the 5 Mile Beach site as well.
Yeah, so that was where the actual plantation was, and that was harvested in 2014, I think. So you've got 10 years of growth, while the 7 Mile side had 70 years of growth, basically, like, because that's when the trees started bobbing up there in the 50s. So you had some massive pine trees, while pretty much everything on the 5 Mile is small. It's not even old enough for commercial, and it probably doesn't have much commercial value, because when they did clear it, they didn't clear it. They just pushed over everything that wasn't ready, and then took out everything that was. So you've just got this real kind of waist deep mess of dead, pushed over pines, with then other pine trees that have grown up through that. So it's a real mess. But so it won't be as arduous to clear. You won't need as big a machinery, and it'll be a little bit simpler. But we'll probably burn more in place and burn some of the undergrowth with some cool burnings, and then, as opposed to doing all the big piles and having all the residue everywhere. So that's sort of one of the differences. We'll attack it, and then give it a little bit of time to naturally revegetate, to keep the sand stable. So when we then go in there and start shaping fairways, there's not as much wind blow and much sand that can get, because that's been one of the issues with 7 Miles. And I know it happened at Barnbougle quite a lot, is that you can have like a month of good weather, then you have one day and it can just ruin a whole fairway, and then you're sort of set back a few months, and there's nothing you can do about it. So having the undergrowth sort of established a bit more before we go in there and start the shaping, and will make a bit of a difference.
And what sort of tentative timelines, obviously subject to change, are you currently envisaging?
Yeah, so I mean, the plan is to get all the burns done and the site cleared before the burn season. So traditionally, you don't need a permit to burn. So a burn permit, you require sort of November, December, January. depending on, and it all just comes down, it just generally happens in the summer. So the plan, we have the site cleared by then, and then so King Collins can start coming down once all the trees are cleared and really working on their routing, and then have them really get to work because all the water infrastructure should be ready for the second golf course, and our recycled water and mains water and all that sort of stuff should come online sort of around November as well. So now we have all that in place, we can attack the second golf course with a bit of gusto. So I reckon, ideal scenario, they'll spend 6 months building the golf course, and we'll be end of 27, early 28. We should be open. So give it 3 years from the end of the year, or maybe 2.5 years from 3 years from now.
Cool.
Yep.
Listen, water management and dependable access to same is a common theme right across Australia, and indeed, obviously, in other parts of the world too. We've already spoken about the irrigation challenges that you faced at 7 Mile Beach. I'd like to switch our focus momentarily down the road to another golf development site located at Arm End, which, relatively speaking, isn't also too far from Hobart International Airport. Having first received planning consent in 2013, it seems to be one of those slow burn golf developments. What can you tell us about your relatively near neighbours in Hobart and some of the challenges that they have faced to date and how they may be slowly overcoming them?
Yeah, well, they don't have any groundwater at all. So we have like a large aquifer that's under, that's right underneath. So we can get access to, bore water, if you like, through the shallow sand spears, which are not ideal. Like, it's very difficult to get enough water out quickly enough when you really need it. So that's why we're sort of really pushing on with recycled water, just to have a backup and to have other options when you do get an incredibly, dry month or two. Well, they didn't have they didn't have the luxury of any groundwater, so they had to get a water source there. And that part of the peninsula doesn't have any. Everything's on tanks, I believe. So they don't have any recycled water. So they had to get a pipe laid, which they're doing right now, I believe, from basically across the river. And so their development is on an area that is it has a lot more public access users right now. It's sort of like the favorite walking track of everyone in the area. So you were a bit more public facing, so it was a bit trickier, I'd imagine, just from everything you do or everything you're planning to do always gets a lot of scrutiny. Well, I feel like the only scrutiny we had was on the process, not on the actual idea. So, there was some other users, the horse riders, but I think once I spoke to quite a lot of those, they realised that we're not actually where they ride their horses for a lot of people. There was this misconception that we were going to going to shut horse riding out, when really it's a 10-kilometre round trip from where they drop their horses off to even get to the edge of the development. And then we're not actually, we're not going to stop people from riding through the golf course as long as they stay, on the trails and that sort of stuff. While, Arm End was, a lot more. So we didn't get the scrutiny from the Tasmanian Conservation Trust. I think Peter McGlone, he was upset that someone was given a development license on public land, but even then that was sort of, not quite accurate, because we weren't given an exclusive license. We were given a non-exclusive license, so anyone could approach the government. Well, he was saying, the government shouldn't be in the business of handing out, licenses to developers, but which, they have to seek development, and it wasn't an exclusive one. It was open to anyone to come up with any idea. So we had some risk there. They've now changed that whole process. Now it's called an expression of interest, and anyone can put an expression of interest to do any type of development in a national park, and then that goes to the state government first. Well, it used to be you have to go through local government, get approval, and then get approval from the state government. So they could turn around, you could go through all the work of getting the approval from the local government, and the state government could change their mind and basically not allow you to start your work. So Arm End's been a lot more forward-facing to the public, so it's had a lot more scrutiny. They were, I think their investor groups changed as they've sort of been doing these two projects. You sort of have the golf course project, then you have the pipeline project, which is sort of, two different capital requirements. And I think the like everything during COVID, the price of everything just went crazy and skyrocketed. So it's been so to get the water over there has taken some time. They've had to, there's a lot of permitting, um, EPA requirements, construction environmental management plans. There's all these sorts of things you have to just do, and they all take time. So I think they finally got to the point where, and the Tasmanian Conservation Trust were sort of challenging everything along the way. So they would put in their construction environmental management plan. It goes to the public. Public can comment. Then they would just come up with all these like little things that you'd have to like go back and adjust, and all this sort of stuff just wastes time, because it will go back to the department. The department will then send emails, get everyone's thoughts. Then it'll come to you. Then you'll have to go to your consultant, and your consultant, there's only like one person in southern Tasmania who can do it. He can get to it, or she can get to it in 6 weeks' time. That takes a month for them to do it. Then you send it back, and then the Tasmanian Conservation Trust says, no, we need you to do this. And then it goes through the whole process. So you take something that you think is just, oh yeah, no problem. We'll adjust it to, change the hours. We won't work at night. We'll only work at night, or we'll only do it during this weather pattern, or we'll make sure, everything's washed down. All those sorts of things that come under your environmental management plan just become just grind everything to a halt. My understanding is they've had quite a bit of that going on. They've had, they're challenging the Tasmanian. They're challenging their substantial commencement ruling under the Clarence Council. That's one of those classic bureaucratic things that doesn't have a definition, that is sort of all on vibes. If you haven't got anything concrete, and if the council gives you commencement, that's basically it. But then, you've got 3 weeks to challenge it. The Tasmanian Conservation Trust, again, they've challenged it, so they've taken it to the Supreme Court. So I mean, they've really been put through the ringer. And then also they've had to, I think they've changed architects. I think they've sort of brought on, they did have Crafter and Mogford. So now you've got OCM involved, who will do a fantastic job. But then again, you've got to restart the process with them. They'll want to change the routing. And then when you change the routing, you've got to go to the public, or to the, the council or the Crown land, and you've got to discuss, well, we want to move this hole here. And they're like, well, no, that's too, it just goes, I mean, it's mind-boggling, the process you've got to go through. So so they've really been put through it. I think also they had, the Aboriginal Heritage Tasmania have accused them of being careless and dumping some. I think the story is that it was basically someone was unloading some pipe from from the back of a truck just to store it, and they just unloaded it and put it somewhere. And then, the guy from the TCT, who's all over them, he's like, well, that's in an Aboriginal relic area. You shouldn't have dropped it there. So then, he's pursued AHT Tasmania to be like, well, these guys have damaged potential Aboriginal relics, which you have to be very sensitive to, and you have to make sure you're across all that sort of stuff. I just think the people who delivered it didn't know, and they just sort of were there and delivered it, and then so it's caused this another delay and another problem for them. But I think eventually they'll get there. I think getting the water across is a huge deal. Well, they can't start until that happens, and my understanding is it should be mid-year next year when they'll actually get the water across and the pipeline across. So I imagine they're probably in the process of they need to get through a few of these sort of legal things, which they will get through. But again, it delays everything. So then they can build their tanks and start filling the tanks up with water, and then they can get working. So unfortunately for them, I think it's been more that the fly in the ointment lives down there, and he has a particular affinity for that area. So he just is all over them all the time. And you can see what, for what something that had broadly had quite a bit of support in 2013 or something when they did their permit, it's now 11 years later, and they've everything they try to do is front page news in the local paper. So it just stirs up all this animosity, which is not a general reflection of what the overall community thinks, but for a few people in the community, it's sort of a do or die issue, which they pursue pretty hard. Is
Just
that that's not a very concise update, but I think it's informative
it's
from my
informative,
understanding.
absolutely, and covers most of the bases. Listen, you often use a Mike Kaiser quotation, namely that one course is a curiosity and two is a destination. That being said, I'm interested to hear what you think happens to golf in Hobart when 7 Mile Beach, 5 Mile Beach are men, obviously allied to Royal Hobart in Tasmania, who will obviously benefit from any rising tide associated with more inbound golfers to Hobart. Your thoughts are appreciated.
Yeah, I think there's two ways you can look at it, right? There either has to be a consolidation around what are the really good golf courses, because I think, or it will just the amount of people coming down. 'Cause, I mean, so Barnbougle, for example, has 90% people from interstate comes down playing Barnbougle. So you'd have to assume that the destination golf resort, once we get to 36 holes and have some accommodations out there, maybe you'd assume we'd have a similar number. So with that number of guests coming down, yeah, I mean, sure, they might go and play Tassie Golf Club, they might go and play Royal Hobart, um, or courses in the surrounding areas. But also, if they're not of the same quality and offer the same sort of experience that we do, then maybe they won't. It might happen a little bit, and then it might not happen at all after a while. And then if the local golfers start looking at it and go, well, I'd sooner play, at I'd sooner play at 7 Mile Beach. 10 times a year than keep my membership at my home club, well, then that could have a detrimental effect to some of the clubs. I mean, the golf has gone through this massive boom with all the young people during COVID actually, getting to go and play golf. And we all know you just have to be exposed to golf and you'll get one or two. Like if everyone played golf, like if you took 4 people, one's going to come out obsessed, even if they said they didn't like golf going into it. It's just that sort of a sport. It gets it hooks into you. And I think that's what happened during COVID. Now, all of a sudden, and once people start playing, they generally play for life. So a lot of these clubs now are kind of oversubscribed. And it's actually, people don't like playing because they got to get on it Thursday morning at 9 a.m. and get on the app and book a tee time. And then they didn't get the tee time they want. And and the courses are always full, which is fantastic for the clubs. But then you're looking at people thinking, well, what am I doing here? Like, I don't enjoy this membership experience. And maybe they'd sooner do a few golf trips and all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, I think it could, and then if it'll go the other way, there'll be a massive downturn in golf. The places that seem to survive are the great golf courses and, and maybe some of the smaller public golf courses. I mean, I think a strong club that has good leadership and has a good foundation. They generally do okay. But I mean, a lot of these clubs that are doing well now were pre-COVID closing or very close to closing. So I can't imagine historically that that's going to change. That in 10 or 15 years' time, we might not go through this whole thing again. So maybe there'll be an opportunity for consolidation. Where all the golf ends up in one spot, where Tassie and Royal and these golf courses in that area end up, being on the peninsula with us because there's 900 hectares and there's room for amazing golf. And, once they sand mine the area, there's, the scope to rehabilitate the area to make it useful because, at the moment, just planting weeds and letting it get overrun is not a useful use after, to rehabilitate the sand mine. So, I mean, who knows what could happen down there, but there's definitely room and scope. So, yeah, and golf courses have a history of moving. They own their land. It's more valuable as not being a golf course. And if they can move somewhere better, maybe there's opportunities for that to happen. So I think it'll be really interesting because, I mean, this period seems to be, I don't remember a time in my life where golf has been this popular. These clubs are just, I mean, when I finished school and when I was working at Royal Melbourne, Royal Melbourne's always been Royal Melbourne. At no point has it not been like the top 5 course in the world, right? It's been there. They haven't changed it. They haven't done anything to it. And I used to work there in the pro shop or on the range. And then every night I would go and play all the holes inside the fence. And I'd literally be the only one on the golf course 5 nights a week. Like there was no one out.
I said this before, but you're a prick.
So that's just, there was no one there. I'd run across someone every now and again. Like, and now it's just booked from, all day, every day, flat out. So it's just changed the dynamic of those clubs. But most of the time, these clubs were pretty empty, except for a Wednesday and a Saturday. Well, I think now you're starting to see. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, because a lot of the clubs have obviously invested a hell of a lot, because you have to. Members come out and start using. It's not like all memberships are like gym memberships. It's like they hope you never turn up, because if you start turning up and the place gets busy, now we have to start servicing you, and we have to start getting new equipment, and we have to start making the place live up to all these expectations. If none of you come, it's like perfect. But it'll be interesting to see what happens when things drop off, and all these clubs have invested heavily in these redos and these redevelopments and spent ungodly amounts of money. Like I hear of clubs spending $4 and $5 million on the irrigation, or $20 million to redo their course, and then they spend $20 or $30 million on a clubhouse, and all of a sudden they've spent $100 million. And you can't even work out where it goes, or what happens when people stop playing golf. I don't know. That's a whole nother podcast and rant, if you like. But I think being a really good golf course gives you a better opportunity.
Before we finish, Matt, I'm keen to do a little metaphorical time traveling with you. Knowing what you know now, if you could offer some advice to yourself back at the start of your 7 Mile Beach adventure, what would that or those things be?
Well, I don't know whether I'd actually be able, like what I tell myself I needed and what I was able to do would be two different things. One would be, you always need more money. Like there's never enough. You know what I mean?
State the bleeding obvious.
Yeah, exactly. Make sure you have more money. That would be the one thing. I mean, it's interesting, and I think sometimes I can see why there's always this criticism of the white shoe developer. He comes in and starts telling everyone how it's got to be, and they're not collaborative and all this sort of stuff, and these out of towners, that whole sort of thing. And I strongly believed in that, you got to bring everyone along, otherwise you can't get it done. And you've got to really work with the coalface, and you've got to do all that. But I think maybe I would have tell myself to be, sometimes you've just got to tell people what you're going to do and not have these discussions over what should be done. It should just be more like, look, we need to do this, and it doesn't happen unless we do it this way, and to be a little bit more blunt and forceful. Maybe might never have gotten to where we are, but I can understand people who do this all the time. I can understand how they end up with the attitude they have and become quite not aggressive, but I think you know what I mean. How there's that the developers coming in and telling everyone what to do, and this is how it's got to be, and all that sort of stuff, and they're not local, and they don't understand how the locals work. Well, I think that is it's true to a point, but you've also got to at some point stand up for what you need and push people along a little bit. That would be the two main things. Yeah. I mean, I think it's been. I'm not sure. I mean, COVID, we've been through it. You know what I mean? COVID was unbelievable. I think everyone feels that way. You look back and it's just okay, that happened. But at the time, trying to get anything done, or just being able to trying to get out to Tasmania or Australia at all, it was just an impossibility. And to be under the pressure from getting substantial commencement and all these sorts of things, it's it's been quite the journey. It's been quite the journey.
Well, trying to get De Vries into the country in the first place was a bit of a mission.
Yeah, and because processing visas and all that sort of stuff, it wasn't it used to take a couple of days, and it was taking weeks or months and all that sort of stuff. It was, and I couldn't get in there. I think in hindsight, for this particular development, I would have. I think once we got down there and De Vries and could get down there, we wanted to get going when really we probably should have waited a little bit around, because I think we spent a lot of time waiting for areas to be burning them, but it was kind of out of sequence to how you would want to ideally do it. So ideally, you'd want to have started near the water source, worked out, but then I would clear a whole area and do a burn on the peripheral, and we'd be so excited to be like, oh, we can finally do something over there. You get over there and do it, then realize, well, it's ahead of schedule. The irrigation's not there yet, and now we're just going to have to go over to this area, and we probably lost a bit of time because the wind would blow, and that's it. It would just sort of blow everything away, and then Mike would get frustrated, and we'd go back somewhere else. But yeah, that was the main thing. Like you need so more water to begin with would have been handy. A lot of that was we probably built a bigger golf course than maybe we expected to in the end. But they're just more details. I think if I really, more money and be more direct.
Okay, you'll know for the next time.
Yeah. Look out, Clarence Counts. Look out, local bureaucrats.
Exactly.
I'm coming for you.
Exactly. You'll be glad to hear we're into the final stretch, Matt. I mentioned earlier on, I saw on LinkedIn that you recently welcomed some of your fellow members from Charlotte Golf Club to 7 Mile Beach. Now, Hobart is a bit of a trek to Charlotte, so I'm pretty sure they must have appended some additional golf to their trip down under. How did they enjoy the golf course at Hobart, and where else did they go on their travels?
So they came down to, they played Royal Melbourne East. They played Kingston Heath in the Furrow. I think they call it the Furrows short course. Mm-hmm. They played Cape Wickham. They played Ocean Dunes. They played Barnbougle, and they played Lost Farm. And then they played an 11-hole loop at 7 Mile, and they said it was the best one they played. So I felt good about that. They didn't play the West course, so that's the main challenger, I think. But they were completely blown away. They had a perfect day too, like everything. Like it's a beautiful day, not too much wind. They loved Hobart. I think Hobart, as I said, is just like the hidden gem of this whole project. I think people are going to absolutely love it. If you haven't been to Hobart, it's become an incredibly popular tourist destination. That all happened during the global financial crisis when people stopped travelling outside of Australia and started doing their big international trips and started looking more inside Australia. And they went to, people started coming to Hobart, and that just triggered a whole sort of circular investment in experiences, and all of a sudden people started seeing the visitor numbers to Hobart, so then you could start to put then all the main hotel chains came down. So you had Marriott, who did one of their luxury collection hotels called the Tasman, which is just a beautiful hotel. So now all of a sudden you have these sort of higher end experiences, and so they were, to couple us with what Hobart had to offer, I think, compared to the other places. I mean, they loved Melbourne, but obviously Barnbougle, the place they really loved, which was their second favourite, was Cape Wickham. They loved Cape Wickham. I thought that was like this, Pebble Beach has got nothing on Cape Wickham. They just couldn't say enough good things about Cape Wickham. They loved that, but unfortunately, it's a really difficult place to get to. And then once you get there, outside of King Island, there's a little bit to explore, but really there's not much. It doesn't have that supporting infrastructure that can have you be there for 2 or 3 days and do other stuff. And then they went to Queenstown and they played Jacks Point, Millbrook, and then the Hills, which is about to get redone, I believe. So that was on sort of my suggestion, because they were coming down and they were thinking about, they go to New Zealand. Like, we probably won't get on. Like Taiarai and Tara Iti, they're really expensive, but they're really hard to get onto. Then they weren't going to go. I'm like, we'll go to Queenstown, because it's just one of those places in the world that, it's probably one of the prettiest places in the world. And you can't have a bad time there. And it's kind of like where Carmel by the Sea is spectacular. Everyone who goes there is blown away. It's just this little bit. So it's this little bit of New Zealand. Like, in New Zealand, it's a spectacular place, but Queenstown is just something else. Like, you can't have a bad time in Queenstown. Golf courses are okay. They're nothing to write home about. They're nowhere near the quality of the courses they played in Australia. But yeah, so they had a great time. But we were number one. So
good.
Maybe they're just being nice to me, but I was happy about that.
Well, Clayton's going to be very upset to hear they didn't play Arrowtown when they were in Queenstown.
Oh no, yes, yeah, that's his bugbear with everyone. I told them about it, but they didn't have enough days. They pretty much play. I mean, they were down for 17 days, and I think they played 15 of them, so they had a pretty good crack.
That's all right. Assuming a November 2025 opening for 7 Mile Beach, when do you anticipate that you will officially be open for bookings?
Probably 6 months before, I reckon. That seems to be enough time. I don't know. Look, stay tuned.
That would potentially be May then, so yeah?
Yeah, exactly. No, I do. As you said, going back to your earlier discussion, I get a lot of emails every day, people, and I know it's frustrating, but I want to make sure we have everything. And knowing the bureaucratic process and how everything works, and people are booking and they're trying to book tickets and flights and trying to work it in with other trips, I would sooner disappoint people now, but know that when they book it, they're coming.
Gotcha. For those listeners looking to salve their anticipatory excitement levels, myself included, they could do worse than visit the 7 Mile Beach merchandise shop. I suspect our mutual friend Ali Phillip has placed a few additional orders at this stage. It looks like you've been adding to the stash available. What can you tell us about any new arrivals?
The fun stuff is the stuff that's actually at the site.
Oh, you're holding more back, you bollocks.
Exactly. So there's a whole different logo and a whole different, some sort of collector items, things that you can only get if you play during the preview play period. So there's a tiger head who has a hard hat and a shovel in his mouth.
Nice.
For the under construction, but we don't sell that on the actual on the merchandise shop. So
okay,
once you get down there, you can grab some of that. But yeah, we're always just, I mean, like a lot of things, we're just sort of trialing things. We just want to get it right, and like we're all sort of perfectionists, and we all have our opinions on which merchandise does well, and the sort of things we want to do, and where we want to position our brand to show that we're kind of sort of a little bit more of an upscale Hobart experience, but not an unattainable, aspirational bucket list thing. So somewhere in between there. So we want to have good quality merchandise, but not have it be crazy expensive, but be good quality and make sure I think, Nick Mills at, Sandbuilt did an amazing job with the logo. So he's made our sort of job easier there, and that people like it, and they like to have a shirt with it or a hat with it. And so we're always experimenting, and we got some matchstick socks, the English long socks. Are they called match play?
That's surely your
Exactly.
throwback to your days at Royal Hobart, yeah?
100%. I'm like, I'm going to get some. No one wears them.
That's a piss take, man. That's a piss take.
And they're beautiful green with the stripe, and they have the logo on them, and they're knee-length socks. So when you come down, you can get your knee-length socks, so you'll be the most stylish guy out there.
Yeah, with my legs, I don't know about that. I did get a present of a pair of British Golf Collectors Society long socks last summer, which have yet to see the light of day, but I do intend on wearing them.
Yeah, it's just a bit of fun. It's a bit of fun.
It's just a question of matching burgundy with something. It's not really something I haven't.
Well, maybe the idea is to not match it.
Well,
that's the whole point. Make them stand out.
There's an idea. In conclusion, we spoke previously about the why would you do that mentality that exists occasionally in Tassie. We can be thankful that people like Greg Ramsey and Richard Sattler at Burnboogle, Duncan Andrews and Andrew Mitchell at Cape Wickham and Ocean Dunes respectively, and indeed your good self and the team at 7 Mile Beach have paddled upstream in your endeavours to grow some tall poppies that can withstand currents, lack of water and the roaring 40s gales. Kudos and thanks to you and all the aforementioned for their continuing work. Matt, it's been great to have you back. You won't be surprised that my anticipation levels have just ratcheted up another few notches. So thanks for that.
You just want some of those construction hats.
I do. But I'm actually
You're going to have to come out. You're going to have to come out now.
Funnily enough, I'm now minded to immediately book those flights that I was looking at last week, and I shit you not.
Excellent. All right. We'll look forward to having you.
Best luck with opening and your continuing seniors endeavours. Keep enjoying it and chat soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Sean.
Many thanks for tuning in. If you don't currently follow us on socials, you can do so as follows. On X, you can find us at Firm and Fast Golf. On Instagram, Firm and Fast Golf Podcast. On Blue Sky, if you're that way inclined, the Firm and Fast Golf Podcast. On YouTube at the Firm and Fast Golf Podcast, and indeed finally on Substack at the Firm and Fast Golf Podcast, occasional newsletter. We favour to ask, if you're still with us, if you're enjoying the show, you might consider giving us a star rating or a review on your podcast platform of choice. It really would be appreciated. Thanks again.